For many people, the idea of fostering an older child or a teenager is scary because it seems inconsistent with a theory of parenting and child development called birth order. Birth order is a major consideration for many people as they consider foster care. If you're not familiar, birth order is a shorthanded way to explain how the ages of the children in any given home affect the social dynamics and maybe even the personality of those children. It was first proposed as a theory by a psychologist named Alfred Adler right around the turn of the 20th century, and it's been developed a lot more since then. Adler, painting with way too broad a brush, claimed that the oldest child in a family tends to be more dutiful, the middle child tends to be more flexible, and the youngest child tends to be more ambitious. Now, there's some serious problems with birth order theory, but it's not the worst parenting theory ever, and many people find it useful. And it has some interesting applications in foster care because, if you're adding new children to your family, even just temporarily, you're altering the birth order in some way. Even if you only foster children younger than your youngest biological child, which is a very common approach, the youngest biological child in your home won't be the youngest child in the home anymore. But if you have your heart set on a foster care strategy driven by birth order theory, there are two approaches that make it possible to care for teenagers and older children. First, you could decide to care for only children younger than your youngest biological child. But if you do that, I would ask you just to update your expectations as your children grow. So, for example, if your plan is to only care for children younger than your youngest, who is 5, then a year from now, it would stand to reason that you'd be willing to care for a 6-year-old. And 12 months after that, you'd be willing to care for a 7-year-old. Let's call this the growing into it approach to caring for older children in foster care. And that's a fine approach, but especially if you're a family with young children, it can take you a while to grow into being ready to care for children who are older or teenagers. But there's another way to preserve birth order that I want to mention while we're on this subject, which maybe we'll call it the over-the-top strategy. And basically, instead of caring for children only younger than your youngest biological child, you do the opposite and instead only care for children older than your oldest biological child. This is another popular approach by foster parents, and it has the virtue of protecting birth order in much the same way that the growing into it approach does. In my very unscientific opinion, if you leave enough space between the age of the foster child and the age of your oldest biological child, I tend to think it does a better job at protecting birth order. Kids kind of run in packs almost. They, a group of children of a similar age will naturally gravitate to one another and play together. And so if you leave enough space, 3 or 4 years ought to do it, you'll create the social dynamics in your home of 2 or more like packs of children who mostly play independent of one another. There you have it, 2 approaches to birth order theory that still make it possible to foster an older child or teenager. If you'd like to explore this further, visit skookumkids.org/fostercare. We'd love to have a conversation with you about what it would look like in your family to welcome an older child or teenager who needs a place to stay for a while.